Welcome back to Dr. Supercoach YouTube. You're on with Pig for another week of captain recommendations. We're now at round 23, only 2 weeks to go. 2 weeks for any last minute ranking climbs, 2 weeks to win your league matchups and take out premiership glory. With not many trades left, or probably no trades left, you might be in a position where you're in a league final and there might only be, 5 unique players. So picking the right captaincy option is absolutely the way to get ahead now. So that's what I'm here to help you with. Last week was mental. I did call it. I said we would have our first ever 2,800 score in Supercoach for the year last week. And boy, did we ever. In fact, we had 11 coaches clear 2,800 when it hadn't been done at all prior to then. The team of the week actually cracked 2,900. That is bonkers. The reason I thought last round would be the highest scoring Supercoach round of the season was because so many popular gun players had elite matchups. This week isn't as juicy. I don't think we're going to see the scoring we did last week, but there's still some really nice choices out there, including another fun pod VC. I'll give you a little clue to them. Let's hear about the 3 vice captain options. My number 3 option that I really like is Dane Zorko. The Zorko didn't really take advantage of the St Kilda matchup 2 weeks ago, which is kind of when we thought he'd go big. So that might explain why he's kind of flying under the radar recently. But his other scores this month have been good. He's got a 117, a 138, and a 129. They're not bad at all. This week, he gets the Collingwood Magpies matchup. The Pies are the second easiest matchup for designated kickers over the last 5 games. They've given up big scores to the likes of Nick Blakey, 117, Nick Newman, 144, and Nick Vlosten, 118. And this big scoring trend isn't just exclusive to players named Nick. Jaden Short had a 113, James Sicily had a 123, Max Holmes had a 118. They've all scored well against Collingwood as a designated kicker as well. So if you look at every single designated kicker that has played against the Pies in the last 5 rounds, you'll see that they've given them a 12% boost to their current form. That's even the ones that haven't done well, so that's just on average. If Zorko adds 12% to his current form, you're looking at a pretty safe floor of 125. Jack Sinclair. Jack Sinclair has been featuring in my captain videos a lot lately, and he's been rewarding his owners. He's averaging 126 over his last 4 games. Not only that, his last 3 games against Geelong have netted him scores of 137, 116 and 107. So this is a player in good form against an opponent he usually scores well against. Normally just that would be enough of a reason for a VC recommendation, but I'm going to give you more than that. Over the last 5 games, Geelong are the 3rd easiest matchup for attacking defenders and the 3rd easiest matchup for designated kickers, and they're the 2nd easiest matchup for general defenders. So what that meant, scored 100, Rory Lobb 126, Luke Ryan just had a 156, Jordan Clark at 138, even Jackson Archer had an 87, and he's not that much of a Supercoach scorer yet. So they're just some of the players to get massive boost to their season average when they play in defence, when they play against Geelong. So Jack Sinclair, he's in better form than all of those players. So this is a really great VC or C option on the Saturday night, and he probably actually would be my number 1 VC recommendation if it wasn't for the big numbers that I expect this next guy to put up. And that next guy, my number 1 VC option, is Lachie Neale. So I just talked through the big points that Collingwood are giving up to designated kickers. Well, they're also giving up huge scores to inside midfielders. I mean, we only need to look at the last. Paddy Cripps scored a 125. They've all cooked these cold pies in the last 2 weeks. Those 5 players have combined to score an average of 39% above their current form in their matchup with Collingwood. That's great news for Lachie. Do I expect Neale to get a 39% boost to his current form? Probably not. 39% boost is massive. And if he did, it would lead to a score of 163. But, with a Brownlow medal up for grabs and only 2 games left to add to his tally, I'm expecting Neale to play out of his skin over the next fortnight. And with no Collingwood player doing tagging jobs, maybe I shouldn't be ruling out a 163 projection. If you own Lachie Neale, I think your VC needs. Now we go to my pod vice captain. Let's keep this hot streak of pod VCs going for the final 2 weeks. This time, it's a risky pick, but I think it's one that will go bonkers. We've had our eye on you for some time now, Mr. Anderson.
As you can see, we've had our eye on you for some time now, Mr. Anderson.
No stadium versus 87 points at other venues. I don't know any other player with a home versus away discrepancy like that. 133 points per game at home, that's amazing. But this week, he's played 8 games in the Gold Coast this year and he's put up scores of 85, 122, 129, 132, 140, 150, 151, and 155. Absolute insanity. Oh, I need to pause and catch my breath because that made me excited. But that isn't all. A matchup with the Melbourne Demons, who are giving up the most points to inside midfielders over the last 5 games. If you remember back to previous videos, I've targeted Melbourne in the last few weeks. I targeted them with Butters, who scored a 131. I recommended Bontempelli, and he scored a 182. Treloar for that 149. And before that, Sarong for his 140. So I've been targeting Demons for ages, and they're just giving up so many points. To add to that, Jason Horne-Francis just had a 141. Match made in heaven for Noah Anderson owners. Playing at the Gold Coast where he's averaging 133. He's just dominating, playing against the Melbourne Demons team that are giving up points. Look, I was getting excited by my Lachie Neale research before, but this Noah Anderson research might just tip me over the edge. Now, let's say those VCs don't. Number 5 is Toby Nankervis. I've been keeping an eye on Rad a 132. Luke Jackson had a 116. Even my boy Sam De Koning had a 125. And Toby Nankervis himself in their last meeting had a 131. So that's some really good scores against Hawthorn and Meeks, one of the best in the game at winning a hit out. But in Toby's highest scoring games, he's been able to get around 20 disposals and a bunch of tackles to add to his hit out numbers. So he's not just relying on hit outs. And Meek hasn't shown that he's been able to restrict his opponents this year. Especially around the ground, they've been able to get away from him. So I think that bodes well for Toby Nankervis' scoring. I don't expect this to be one of Toby's big 150 scores. I don't think that's Sunday afternoon. Another safe fallback option on the Sunday afternoon is Marcus Bontempelli. The Bont is still the highest scorer in Supercoach 2024. It'll be interesting to see if he can hold on to that mantle for the last 2 games. I've captained him the last 2 weekends because he's had really nice matchups. This week, he has a harder battle. North Melbourne are a neutral matchup for inside mids over the last 5 games, which is actually a really big improvement from the times Bontempelli has destroyed them previously. So no inside midfielder has even cracked 115 against the Kangaroos since Chad Warner did it in round 18. So that isn't great reading. But what is great reading is Bont's scores of 157. I'm not expecting that on this occasion given North's improvement. But this is a midfield that they don't have a tagger big enough to stop Marcus, and it's shown in past meetings. This should be a safe captaincy score from a guy who hasn't sub-tonned since the first half of the season. Then my number 3 captain option is in line with the difficulty of his opponents over the last month. The good news for owners is that he gets one of the easiest matchups in the league this weekend. A date with the West Coast Eagles, who are currently giving up the second most points to inside midfielders. Only the Demons are worse. So last week, Tom Powell had a 123, Harry Sheezel had a 122. Before that, Matt Rao had a 122, Andy Brayshaw had a 137, Hayden Young had a 117. So they've all torched the Eagles over the last 3 weeks. And none of those players are the captain of a team that desperately needs a win, coming off a flogging last week and getting crucified in the media. This is one of those games where I fully expect Cripps to put Carlton on his back and drag them to the win as the skipper. Patrick loves playing in Perth. He actually averages 122 points per game at Optus Stadium, and that is by far his highest scoring ground when you look at venues that he's played 5 or more games at. So I think this could be big. A fired up Patrick Cripps playing in Perth against the struggling Eagles midfield. And look, he had 153 points last time he played the Eagles at Optus, so that's setting the ground. Rowan Marshall has 4 scores of 123 or more in a row. Did you know that? He's on fire. And he's got a brilliant run to finish the season. This week is a matchup with Geelong, and he'll likely be rucking against Rhys Stanley. Marshall's last 2 games against Geelong have led to scores of 127 and 141. To add to those stats, Geelong are the second easiest opponent for ruckman over the last 5 games. Luke Jackson didn't really take advantage last week, but prior to that, we can see O'Brien had 117, Tristan Cherry had that 151, English had a 139, and Darcy Cameron had a 131. So there's been some ruckman destroying Geelong recently. And admittedly, some of those games, Sam De Koning was the Cats' hit out ruckman, either of them. But that isn't how Rowan Marshall scores. Over the last 3 weeks, Rowan is averaging 22 disposals, 10 marks, and 2 goals per game. That's huge. He's in form, and he's finding the footy around the ground. Old man Rhys Stanley is not stopping that. I love this for a safe 130, so I think you could feel free to VC him on the Saturday night, or you could use him as your fallback captain option, whatever you want. But the number one this week, he's been my number one last week. He was really highly rated the week before, is Tristan Cherry. This guy is just killing it. DFS actually lists the Bulldogs as a neutral matchup for ruckman over the last 5 games, but I'm not falling for that. I know what Tim English is, and he's not a tough battle for someone like Cherry. The data is skewed by English playing against a ruck-sharing Pitnet and Tom De Koning in round 18, and a ruck-sharing Sam De Koning and Blitzars in round 19. So has had a 117, that's well above his season average. Gawn had a 130, that's well above his season average. Grundy had a 96, that one looks like it's maybe a bit of an outlier. Before that, Oscar McInerney, a 131, well above his season average. That is more like it. Those 5 players got an average of an 11% boost to their current form. That's even when taking in Grundy's bad game. So if Cherry gets an 11% boost to his current form, it's another monster. No DFS says he kind of is. That's just because he's played some ruck sharing guys that skews the data. English only wins the battle in 38% of his ruck contests. They have plenty of ample opportunity to rack up hitouts to advantage, and that always boosts their score. Cherry had 33 hitouts last weekend, and in games where Cherry has had 33 hitouts this year, he's averaging 129 Supercoach points. But look, he's doing more than just hitouts right now. He's averaging 10 tackles per game over his last month, and he somehow worked out how to add 20 disposals and 5 marks per game to his repertoire. He's just doing everything. This is a player on the hottest of hot streaks against a very easy opponent. He's got a 3-round average of 160, and I genuinely think it could be a 4-round average of 160 after this weekend. Owners should just keep the captaincy on Cherry for the rest of the year. Don't move it off him. Now, let's go to a little bit of draft action. I've had plenty of people say they're really enjoying the draft captain option. So this is where I list a bunch of players who didn't make the cut. They didn't make that top 9, but they've got favourable or easy matchups this week. So whether they're on the waiver, you could stream them in, or you might want to kind of bring them off your bench or even captain them. Some good guys here. So Isaac Heaney, Chad Warner, Errol Goulden, Matt Rao, Will Powell, Stephen May. Actually really like that one as a VC in draft. Max Gawn and Jesse Hogan don't have great matchups, but Max Gawn's in good form. Jesse Hogan's fighting for the Coleman. I think they could have a spike. Then guys with good matchups again, Tom Green, Kieran Briggs, Joe Danaher, Josh Dunkley, Zach Butters, Connor Rozee, Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira, Joby McKercher, Dylan Moore, Will Day, John Newcomb. I really like the Hawthorn boys against Richmond, so you could look at Amon, D'Ambrosio, or Sicily. Then you could look at Lloyd Meek, Jake Waterman, Sam Walsh, Mark Pitnet, Harry Mackay. Nick Newman is one I really, really like. The captain on at the end. He was actually unlucky not to make the top 9. I think he's going to dominate West Coast, so they're over it now. I think there's some awesome high-ceiling VCs this week, including Dane Zorko and Jack Sinclair. But the 2 that really excite me are Lachie Neale and Noah Anderson. I think they're going to go bonkers as a VC. So if you own over either of those guys, I would be VCing them. If your VC fails, I do like Bont, Nank, Marshall and Cripps as safe fullbacks. However, Tristan Cherry comes in to take the cake as the best Sunday captain option by a landslide. Now, what I'm going to do, unfortunately, I don't own any of those players that excite me. I don't own Cherry or Neil or Anderson. If I owned any of those, they would be in my calculation. So I'm probably going to look at a Zorko VC into a Bont C and just hope for a 130 from one of them. I'm not kind of going massive in my own team this week, but those that have those other guys should be looking to go massive. Just wrapping up, we're only 30 subscribers away from 2,500. 30 away, so let's get there. Please share this video with your friends, get them to subscribe, log into your mum's account, get her involved, whatever it takes. Let's get us over that mark. Now, good luck everyone this weekend. I hope your VC or your C brings you great joy.
Trotters tapping mud and clay. Pig's got plenty